on YouTube, and it's going live. Hey everybody on YouTube. Twisted Artisan here. My name is Sean. I am at Stitched Interiors with owner Brad.
Let's go.
And as you know, we are going to talk about can airbags be repaired? And it's basically the elephant in the room. I mean,
I agree. Crazy
opinions on this from one side of the spectrum completely to the other. One of the things I like to say on my page, I got somebody commented that, and I know you're going to go the opposite way. It said that everybody does it and nobody talks about it. So it's the big elephant in the room is what it is. Yeah, so we're going to talk about it. I think it got a lot of excitement, and we're just going to kind of dive right into it. Let's just state right here in the fact it's not something that you really feel comfortable with doing in your shop. I do want to touch on that really before we go into depth.
I do not. We have work around a lot of airbag systems, but it's not something we feel comfortable as far as, say, seam repairs or anything of that nature. I just don't believe that the liability justifies both the profit on the back end or anything of that nature to involve ourselves in dealing with airbag covers. It's something I think I don't want to say move past as a shop, but I don't see it as a necessity for our shop to move forward with.
Okay, and I completely understand that. You know, coming in and checking your shop out. Disclaimer. Okay, yes, let's go ahead and get right in there. Disclaimer, this is not legal advice. No. This is two trimmers giving their thoughts on the process. Just to give you time to pause and rethink what you're doing. There's a lot of safety involved in this.
Absolutely.
So that's kind of the reason we wanted to bring it up. Like I said, it's the big elephant in the room. Some shops are doing it, some shops won't do it. So I wanted to talk about, I've personally done it. I've done it in my business, and I did it quite often, but I had guidelines. I had criteria that they had to meet, and I know as a beginner I did it and then kind of shied away from it and got back into it. Have you ever done an airbag?
I have. Back in the past when we were first getting started, I've done maybe less than a handful that I can think of offhand.
Okay.
It came in the door, it seemed like an easy job, I went ahead and did it. I didn't quite put the thought through maybe as to what I was doing at the time, but then as I gravitated in this business and I got more and more experience, I learned that maybe that wasn't correct as far as how I want to run my business.
Okay.
So then I stopped doing them and I started trying to find other methods, which I know we're going to touch on later. So no,
sure.
I'm not here to say I've never done it, you're a terrible upholsterer if you do. That's not what we're here to say.
No.
We're here to kind of try and move forward as far as take the best information you could find and use that as far as a process.
Absolutely, work it into your business. It still might be a hard no for you. It might be a yes for you after this video. Also, brush on, if you're in the hot rod industry or exotic car industry like yourself, sure. You're not dealing with this on a day-to-day basis like some of the other shops out there that deal basically in your standard everyday driving cars.
And if anybody's commenting, give us an idea of what you do. Maybe you're a hot rod guy and this is completely foreign to you. You don't deal with this, or maybe you work on exotics every day and you deal with this every day. Help us understand where you're coming from, much like we're going to try and point you in the direction of where we're coming from.
Correct. And as we're touch bases, not just getting in the seats, going into some of the luxury cars out there, you do have airbags in the dashes, in the roofs of the car, sometimes in the steering wheels. And you do have to do work on that. So we're not just talking about seat airbags, although that's what caught your attention. I kind of want to touch bases on the whole industry and some things that even an exotic guy like yourself that does some of those types of cars might find himself in that type of a situation.
Absolutely, and we still run into issues where we may have to repair or resew or do something with a seam. We'll try and find workarounds and things of that nature. It happens in everything. As many of you have commented over the weeks, you're not getting away from airbags, so we need to learn how to work around them.
Correct. And now another I've scoured the internet, and I haven't been able to find any solid information out there. The way that my shop handled airbag repairs is, one, there was a full criteria, but we actually would take a micrometer, I noticed that you had one, and we would actually mic the stitches out, and we would lay it out exactly the way the airbags were, sew it up with the same caliber thread. Typically it was a 69 weight. Every once in a while it would be a 92 weight, and we would sew it like that, identical to how the factory would do it. Once again, there were other procedures that were in place, and I'm going to talk about those in a second, but that's what I'm talking about is getting down to the actual procedure. There's no guidelines out there. There's no in the aftermarket collision world, they actually have a procedure process.
They do, and for your welding, for your removal, all that kind of stuff. But when you get to the upholstery side, there's very, very little information out there. And not that we have the information to provide, we're just making a note that, yes, there is very little information because we're on two kind of different sides of this argument, but we can't even come together on a common ground for what we should or shouldn't do because we can't find that information. We've both been trying because we wanted to be informed, but there's just nothing out there, unfortunately.
And what you hear, if you read a forum, is don't do it, you're going to be sued, there's, lawsuits, lawsuits. And as I've done the research, I would like to say that I haven't found an actual lawsuit where an upholstery shop in general had been taken up and had a claim brought against them, although I found multiple lawsuits to where the car manufacturer or the airbag manufacturer was sued and taken to court. I wasn't able to find a single case where a trim shop was. And that was something that I had looked at, once again, in the past before deciding to do airbags. Now, let me just go ahead and get right into the content. If a client came to me, what the procedure would be to say, yes, I will take that job in, just so you can kind of see some of the procedures that I would go through. First, it would not go to a trimmer in my shop that had less than 5 years experience. I think having some solid experience is definitely needed in this case.
I would say.
They're dealing with a life-saving device. So, being able to operate the sewing machine, understanding the stitch lengths and stuff like that are very important. So that was the first thing. It always went to a minimum of a senior installer. Second, we always looked and checked to see if there was a factory kit out there. Mm-hmm. Is there a factory cover available? That's going to get rid of all liabilities. I highly recommend going that route. Even if you have, let's say a body shop sends you something, they just want it stitched up. If it's on the market, it takes the liability off the table. Why would you not go that direction? And then it's peace of mind personally, because somebody's life is in, your hands basically if you decide to take on an upholstery job to fix an airbag.
And as a matter of touching on that, it's also kind of a simpler job. Job comes in, take the cover off, put a new one on. It's sort of a no-brainer for most upholstery shops. You don't have to worry about seams, you don't have to worry about the liability. You bring it in, you put a cover on, you move on with your life. You make a few bucks, and that kind of removes, we can't necessarily say it removes all the liability, because we don't know if there's liability or not, but it removes a lot of the potential liability.
Correct. And then, as far as that goes, so we started with the factory covers, but then the next step would be to go to an aftermarket covers that has the factory options. They still have the factory machines that put the airbag stitching in there to standard and stuff like that. So that would be the next step that I would recommend. Finding a factory cover, not available, looking for an aftermarket cover is the next step.
Agreed.
Another thing I want to touch on is I had a lot of insurance. Mm-hmm. So basically, I would say a minimum of $1 million policy. And when you're having the policy written out, you want to make sure, and I did this more because I had multiple employees, over 10, we'll just say over 10, and I wanted to make sure that if an employee forgot to, bolt a seat in or a seat belt in, or maybe they forgot to plug the airbag in, that the insurance was going to cover it. And then once we knew that it was going to be covered, we went into airbag repairs and stuff like that along the same lines to make sure that we were going to be covered.
Absolutely. And touching on what he said as far as insurance, anytime I've ever tried to get an insurance policy, be it on the shop or on any kind of work, they specifically ask, do you work on vehicles that involve airbag systems? Are you working in airbag systems? They want to know what you're doing, because then the coverage may fall on them because of the liabilities involved and things of that nature. So if they're not asking, there may be an issue there, or you should be asking them. You should do a little bit of due diligence to figure out what this is. If things are coming into your shop and you want to run and have a successful business, I believe you should do the due diligence to make sure your insurance coverage is covered. If something goes wrong, is anybody going to be behind you, or are you SOL? You kind of got to do some work to make sure, especially insurance, like you said, multi-million-dollar policies. These things, we're playing with people's lives here, so you kind of need to make sure you're a little bit covered.
Yes, and once again, going on the policy, so it started with just a regular policy, but I did a lot of leather kit installs. One of the manufacturers actually had an umbrella policy over my policy for the exact same reason, because there is that much of a liability out there.
Sure.
They wanted to make sure that if I was putting their name brand into a car on a lot somewhere, that I was covered and they were covered.
Absolutely.
For that reason.
And there, you're double, tripling coverage. Is it enough? We still don't know, but at least you have some umbrella over everything. You're taking the time to make sure those things are in place.
So another thing I want to touch on is early in my career, one thing, I've been dealing with airbags for a long time. Early in my career, I'd say around 2009, I worked at a company that did convertible top conversions. Now, when they started doing the conversions, they were literally cutting the tops off of the cars. The cars would come in, they have airbags in the overhead systems. So my job was to remove the airbags. We would actually cut the wires to the airbags, put diodes in the airbags, to fool the system into thinking that the factory airbags were still there. Although the seats still function, the doors still function like factory, there was no roof, so there was no roof to function. I know a way that he got around some of the legalities of that is there was actually a sticker placed in the door saying that there was modifications, and I bring that scenario up because I now know to this day it is a factory option. He's done it so often, and they've made an agreement that now you can order this car from the dealership with his conversion on it. I'm sure they've had some adjustments on that type of a system, but that's where it started. So,
but in that case, the manufacturer now might be making plug-in diodes, so everything comes out of their doors correct. They can verify that it's correct, so it's a different situation.
I would imagine at this point, but what I wanted to touch on is there's so much fabrication out there, and we get a bad rep in the airbag market, but let's just relate it to something like window tinting.
Sure.
It has the same thing. I personally have illegal tint on my car currently, but I made that choice. But a window tinting shop, I don't know how they do it here, when you go in, it's a cash sale. Typically you don't have a warranty, and there's certain ways around that. It's illegal, and I bring that subject up because I don't want to skirt around the issue.
Right.
Because we're dealing, once again, we keep going back to people's lives. There is nothing out there written, and this is the part of the segment I'd like to reach out there and say, why? Absolutely. I mean, there should be people. Do we not have an organization? Is there an organization that needs to be built to actually make firm guidelines on this system?
Sure. Why can't we find it? We've been trying to look. Why can't we find guidelines? There should be something.
And we've been doing it for a while. I know there's some big companies out there and forums that do similar things. I would mind reaching out to them and seeing if we could get some sort of a harder guideline to go by, a basis. Is it a hard no? Is it a hard yes? Is there going to be training available? Because it's not going to get, there's not going to be less airbags out there in the future. Sure. There's going to be more. It's going to get more technical. So actually that brings me right up into another thing, that if it's over 15 years old, back in 2002, is when the companies put a I guess a time limit on the airbags.
Right. There's chemicals in them, things degrade, there are concerns as far as longevity.
So, exactly. So after the 15-year mark, now does that make it eligible to work on?
Right.
Going back to the same lines, if there's no guidelines out there, and they're saying that they're only good to a certain point, which is 15 years, which sounds old, but that's 2008, 2009, depending on the release. Depending on the release date. We need some guidelines. It's only going to get worse in the future.
Right. And given the state of the new car market, there's older cars on the road because new cars are more expensive. So older cars are out there. So we're going to run into issues where we have to fix them or work around them.
Correct. And I'm from Florida, so sometimes we'd have convertible tops that would have, get rain in, and the leather would shrink up, get hard, and they're on that line. And the liability is, like you were saying, it's not my car, not touch it, but for the way that your structure works is you're in the hot rod market, and the car is kind of like your business card. It's kind of how it promotes itself.
To an end.
It's where in a smaller shop, it's more going to be community involvement and fixing things like that. And that's why I think the smaller shops lean towards or tend to do airbag repairs a lot more than a hot rod shop or a larger shop, not just because of liabilities.
And I'll be the first one to say, it seems like phenomenal money. If they're coming in the door, you sew them up, you might make a killing doing that. It doesn't appeal to me for other reasons, but it is, if it made no money and had strong liability, I don't think we'd be having this discussion. It's such an easy thing to do. I think people can tend to get themselves into trouble or potential trouble because maybe they're doing things. Because somebody's walking in with $200 seat repairs 10 times a day. That's hard money to turn away. You have to consciously make the decision to go a different direction. That's part of the problem.
Correct. Well, I think we've pretty much touched on anything. Is there anything else that really...
I will say, he touched on the tint kind of stuff. I do know some of our tint laws up here are a little bit different. We're from Maryland. That's where we are currently. If you go in and say, I think our legal limits are 35% or something like that. If you go in and say you want a 10, 15%, they make you sign a waiver. Waivers come up a lot in the nature of discussing airbags. I hear guys say, oh, I'll sew the seam, I'll make them sign a waiver. That's great, but unless your attorney is involved, your insurance company is involved, other people are involved, that might not be worth the paper it's written on. So again, do your due diligence to make sure it's actually doing something. A lot of times, Waivers, as soon as they sign it, you throw it in the trash, and it's just as useful as if you kept and hang on to it. So do the due diligence to see if what you're doing is correct. I see that a lot coming up. Well, I tested the seam, or I did this, or I did that. Did you really, though, because you weren't involving other people outside of your own expertise? And that might be enough, but is it good enough as far as if we have an overbearing board or something in that nature, they could say, yes, that's good, or no, that's not. And I think that's part of the reason we're getting back to. We need someone to help. Correct. Tell us why this is right. Tell us why this is wrong. Give us some information.
Correct. And basically, the information that's out there is just no.
Right. That's what I follow by. If they ever come to my shop, I simply don't do them. I don't think the jobs are worth it. I have other things I can work on. I don't want to say I've moved past it as a trimmer, but it's just not something that entices me as far as a business. I don't need to do it, and I don't then need the liability. There is no liability if I'm not repairing airbag seams or I'm not rewrapping airbag covers. But yes, we do headliners and stuff that have side curtains and things in that. Can we know if those headliners are going to break away correctly? We like to assume because we're wrapping them with similar materials as the manufacturer did, but then again, that's still kind of a gray area. We don't know if they're going to work or not.
It could be just slightly thicker, or and have that resistance.
Or if we bring a car and it's got headliner material, if we do it in Alcantara, we do it in leather, maybe that's changing how things are going to deploy. I know a lot of headliners are designed to bend, not necessarily split.
Correct.
But we still don't know because there's no guidelines.
Well, and the same thing with we were talking about dashes. Yes, you can laser the back of the dashes now because that's a technology that's available to our market. But how deep do you go? How much do you actually cut away?
And even if you reach out to the manufacturer and they give you, if they happen to give you specs, we see it a lot in some of the Ferrari dashes. You pull them apart, you see lots of laser etching.
Correct.
Everything is laser etched. If I could get the exact specs from Ferrari, I still don't know if that would certify me to do it. It might work exactly the same as they do, but even then, you have different hide thicknesses, you have different leather qualities. every hide is different, so you never know how that's going to behave. I can't even prove that they know how it's going to behave because that's just the way things work.
Well, we do know that there's some, with the research both of us has done, we do know that there are companies out on the market that do test the airbags. But as far as that goes, it's not after they've been repaired or anything like that. It's only for brand new products.
And even that's a sample size.
They're going to pull batches, parts out of batches, so that's just a sample, correct? I hope you guys got a little bit of information here. If you have any more questions, go ahead and drop them. Do you have some questions you want to ask?
Sure.
All right. We got Gary. He's actually kind of going to be like a moderator, and he's got some questions here. So go for it, Gary.
And I'm going to stay behind the camera so you won't see me.
Not a problem.
Just a couple comments came through. And first, I just wanted to say that it seems like you guys have more in common than you don't, which is cool. You're just opposite sides of the spectrum for your different reasons. So I think that's important to note. Glow Trim signed in and wanted to add a couple things.
Appreciate it.
Yes, hello and thank you. I've heard you can send the seams or the covers basically to Catskin and they'll do it for you. Any experience on that? And how do you feel about having another set of hands in the project?
Okay, so
Interesting.
I can't speak for them because I'm not their customer.
And I've never done that personally. It sounds like that's feasible, but you have to reach out to them for that.
Okay.
As far as I can believe, I believe they are certified to do it. Again, we're not Catskin representatives, we don't know. That does seem like another avenue to pursue. Yes, another set of hands involved might not necessarily be a bad thing if they can sew the cover and they can. I don't know if they would do cover repairs. They probably have to make them from scratch. That way they could do the certifications, but that's actually a really good question. I don't have an answer for that.
But what I will say is I have visited a large facility like them. And I will say that not all of the covers made in these facilities go through any kind of special machine. I've seen it firsthand where the trimmers were sewing at the table making the seat covers that had airbags. And this was probably the largest company on the market. Like I said, I'm not going to say names, but I was there in the facility. I got to see everything, and that was surprising. That was also about 7 years ago, so things may have changed. It might be every single kit now, but the kit that I noticed and was watching went through a regular sewing machine.
That is interesting, and that may be due to a lack of accountability or anything. We don't know.
We have no idea.
Right.
So we're going to go back to that as far as industry standards, but another comment from Swift Stitch Upholstery.
Okay.
A couple comments. Thank you also for joining and for participating. His first comment was, sign a waiver, you're safer, but not completely safe.
Agreed, 100%.
100%. Matter of fact, on top of that, the way that I did it in my shop, like I was saying, we would go over the benefits and basically what we could get and what we could not get and why we were making the repair with the client. We would email them, and then we would also make them sign the exact same thing on the bottom of the invoice. to update that in today's time, I was telling them I might even video that little bit, say, hey, look, I want to do something, I want to tell you about it, 30, 40-second clip, just so you can kind of tell them the details and you get them understanding it on video.
Absolutely.
And file it away. Any information that you have is extra information.
Yeah, we let the customers know up front, hey, we might
Absolutely.
be working around airbag systems. Usually they know with some of our customers where we're working and what we're doing, but yeah, we're working around these systems. We don't plan on modifying or doing anything out of the ordinary, but we just let them know. And we have customers sign for everything. It may be as far as a color decision or not even a specific airbag. Have customers sign. The more customers that they know up front and the more they approve, the better it's going to be for your shop across the board. Airbags, seat covers, carpet color, doesn't matter. Just have customers know up front and get proof that they know what you're doing. It just simplifies your entire process.
And I was going to say procedure. Everything he was just talking about basically boils down to procedure. The more procedure you have in place, the safer, the better you're going to be.
Sure.
You're going to cut those liabilities.
Dante is joining us on our live feed here,
All right.
checking out the airbags.
And this is some dog. Boy, I tell you what.
Another comment Swift Stitch Upholstery mentioned, just in general, that body shops have more standards than we seem to have in the
Yes,
upholstery
yep.
industry. Just a note. He also commented that Neil from Seatbelt Planet is very educated on seatbelt certifications.
Okay.
Because
Makes
they
sense.
actually are
They are
Yes.
certified.
fully certified.
And I've
yes.
used him quite often. He's a great guy over there. He's hand-built custom hot rod seat belts for me.
Sure.
And then I've ordered factory ones from him. So yes, he's definitely a great source to get information from.
Absolutely, yeah, he does Seatbelt Planet and Seatbelt Plus, same kind of thing. They're both certified, they do all their seatbelts. Again, avoid the liability.
Yep.
We send it to them, they do what they do it right, we put it in, everybody's happy.
Everybody's happy.
Tony's Resto chimed in. Also, thank you for joining.
Yes,
Said
sir.
airbags, seat mounting, seatbelt mounting, they could all be our problem or liability.
Yes.
Yes, and I understand that, but touching on that is, I mean, really, have you ever put, we were talking about this earlier, I mean, if you do hot rods, have you ever put bomber seats in a car? I mean, that's probably one of the most dangerous seats out there, although I absolutely love the look of them, and I mean...
That's something we 100% disagree on because I hate bomber seats.
Okay.
But that's neither here nor there.
I like the looks of bomber seats in the right car, but dangerous. I mean, really dangerous. Have you ever modified a
Piece of
seat?
aluminum.
Yeah. Have you ever bolted a seat in that wasn't factory? I mean, did you have, was it crash tested? I mean, we can keep going on and on.
We don't think this is a standalone issue. It does
No.
translate into pretty much anything we do as a trimmer, you could find some reason to absorb some kind of liability. We understand
Correct.
that. We know that, and we try and mitigate that as best as possible.
We're just trying to put some sort of procedure in place to where if you guys decide to do it or don't decide to do it, you kind of know what that procedure is and why you fall on that side of the fence.
Absolutely.
So
So that's a great segue, what you said about procedure, into the two closing kind of takeaways I get from this debate. One is overall just risk versus reward. Is it worth it? You make a decision for as your shop. But in the end, if there is no risk, meaning if there's no lawsuits, like you said, if no one's ever had a comeback, you don't know if the seam will ever operate the way it should or shouldn't because it never blows. Is there any real risk to it?
Would you like to start with that?
yes, there's still a risk because there could
I
still
agree.
be an accident.
Absolutely. There's always the risk.
What it boils down to is if you're a good trimmer, I mean, could somebody really look at the repair and know that it was done?
It's tough, and it's a can you versus should you.
And
It's
that's where
very tough
it rolls
figure
down
out.
to. No, I mean, I think I can repair a seat that nobody would know, and I think it would deploy correctly. However, that's also why I wouldn't do it unless there was no other option. I really feel like I have to be servicing the client, and then even with servicing the client, I take steps to make sure that they understand that I'm, not to say doing a favor,
Absolutely.
but kind of stepping out on the realm, and they understand the liabilities on their end as well, and that's why I make them sign the forms. And then the last step is the insurance. And I've never had to go there, but with quite a few, over 1,000 airbag repairs.
And I feel exactly the same way. Even if theoretically the risk is hypothetical, no one's ever been sued, there's never been a problem, so maybe it doesn't exist. It definitely sounds like it absolutely could happen.
Absolutely.
I just don't need it.
Yeah. No, and I completely, with the way your business runs, I understand. I'm more addressing this towards the in and out shops,
Absolutely,
the guys
absolutely.
that do it day in and day out. But once again, I still want to stress, if you can get a factory cover,
Go that way.
go that way. I've even upsold them into an aftermarket kit and done the whole car.
Exactly. Maybe
Because
they'll
of the
spend more money.
liability. Absolutely. That's a great a way to upsell and upcharge and make, a great relationship with a client. You're giving them something that you can stand behind, and they're happy with the product when it's said and done. And there's no liabilities.
I actually thought of a question that kind of relates to the scene. What are your thoughts on, say, in an accident, would you repair foam? Or would you replace the foam?
No, I think foam repair is okay.
I would probably agree. I think if there's a replacement, maybe go that route, but
Yeah.
I think it falls in the same thing. Is that going to
Absolutely.
split the same kind of way? Is it going to work the same? But I would sort of agree that I think foam repairs would be okay, but again, I don't know.
If it's an insurance claim, if it's a client comes
Absolutely.
by, I'm ordering
I'm ordering
everything
everything on the
I can to
Yep.
get new. I mean, as
Absolutely.
far as that goes. Now, the issue comes up when it's not available.
Sure.
That's when I start saying, okay, now these are our new options. That's when me and the client have the
Right.
sit down conversation. And then that's when the insurances and the to me, the knowledge, I've been doing this for quite a while, that's where that comes into play.
Absolutely.
So,
And I think that's where we vary a little bit. And like I
Yeah.
said, we're on kind of the same page for this. I don't do them. Do I need to? Yes, no. Have I done them in the past? Yeah, I did a handful. Trying to get past it, get some people some
Sure.
information.
Okay, and then we'll close it out here with our closing comments here.
Okay.
Adam Howard on Upholstery Audio and Tech shared, I wonder if iCar would have interest in expanding into interior repairs.
It's interesting.
They seem to have a solid platform of standards and training for collision. So what I want to build off of that, piggyback
Valid
off that
question.
is, this is kind of the end game of our debate, is basically, is there liability? Yes or no? If there is,
Yes.
we're either completely absolved of it because there's no lawsuits, or the complete opposite of that spectrum is we need a governing body basically that
Correct,
has standards that we can all, that are consistent across the board, that we can all meet so that we can do this safely and without fear of repercussions, or
Because
to
the
do it right for the
manufacturers
customer.
are.
yeah, and at the end of the day, the automotive upholstery industry is different than the home industry and the aviation industry and the boat industry and all the other upholstery type industries because of this safety feature. Now, aviation has their own safety features that they got to
Absolutely.
worry about, burning and stuff like that. So,
But to that note, there are FAA regulations you can find
Correct.
as a trimmer to follow.
absolutely, there's strict guidelines, and that's what brings us here today. Is I guess we're asking the question.
Yeah.
Who can help us start, or where can we go to?
Right, somebody give some information.
Yeah,
There's a
give
lot
us-
of sites
give
out
us
there, a
more
lot of stuff.
information.
Maybe you've dealt with this. I would love to speak to someone who has dealt with genuine legal issues.
Yes,
I
yes.
can't find anyone, and no one can put me in touch with anyone.
I've talked to paralegals. Like I said, I did a lot of research trying to find trim shops that were actually sued, and to no avail. I wasn't able to do it. Finding a lot of automakers and
I
airbag
might be lucky though.
manufacturers.
So,
Yeah, that's a good thing. And at the end of the day, what it boils down to probably is that they're going to go after the big cat, not the
right.
small fish.
We don't want to see trimmers sued, but
No.
we also don't want to see trimmers sued if that's a possibility.
Correct,
So we're
correct.
not looking to try and negate any liabilities or anything like that, but we're just trying to help the people out.
Yeah.
If one person sees this video and decides, oh, maybe I should think about this, that's enough for me.
I got you. Absolutely.
Just
And
take the time to think about what you're doing.
think the process out. Yeah, that's where we're
Absolutely.
at. Think it out. Know what you're doing. Make sure you have all the processes in order if you decide to go that route. Make sure you have your liabilities covered. This is your livelihood, and it's somebody else's life.
Sure. Absolutely.
All right.
Thank you everybody for joining us.
See you next time.